You need to keep transforming. This vision, in our case, is driven by the board, by our group CEO, Shane Nelson, by the senior executive team. We are all in it together from day one, right? So we're all committed to transform the business. And frankly, look, if we don't transform the business ourselves, somebody else will do it for us, right? So I think this idea of constant adaptation, constant transformation is very much required.
Joining me on the couch is Pedro Sousa Cardoso, who is the Chief Digital Officer and Retail Banking Wealth Management with Emirates NBD. What is the role of a CDO?
Every month, every quarter, every year, there are new things that you need to do, to explore, to recreate, to transform. Countries in the Far East are probably more advanced in that journey rather than the West or the Middle East.
Welcome to today's episode of Couchonomics with Arjun. Joining me on the couch is Pedro Sousa Cardoso, who is the Chief Digital Officer and Retail Banking Wealth Management with Emirates NBD, which I'm sure most of you know is one of the top banks in the region and a market leader. With that, Pedro, I wanted to welcome you to the couch.
Thank you for having me, Arjun. Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. You know, we met a few times, and you know, I requested you to come on the show, and you said yes, which is a great honor. So thank you for having somebody. And I think it's the first one from Emirates NBD that I have this in 3 seasons. So that's great. It's a tick in the bucket list of podcasts.
Brilliant.
All right. So Pedro, lots to cover, right? We obviously had part of this conversation when we met during the Dubai FinTech Summit.
Yep.
And we were actually on a roundtable together, which was quite interesting. And I think we'll touch on some of that even today. But what I'd like to start with is, and I'd like to frame this whole conversation in your words, what is the state of banking in the region? And sort of what are the winds of change that you guys are sort of seeing and responding to?
Right. So, look, I think, banking in the Middle East benefits from, good economic growth in the region, right? You see banks in the Middle East and the GCC in particular growing and showing tremendous resilience in the market. And that's on the back of, high oil prices, supportive non-oil economic sectors that are growing tremendously, like tourism, services, and other things, and extended liquidity they have, right? So if you think about it, banks in the Middle East compared to other regions around the world, say the Western economies, for instance, they benefit from these, better economical environment, and this is driving profitability in a very sustainable way, right? Whereas, other parts of the world are probably showing less economic growth, and that is, also impacting their expansion plans and their growth plans to a certain extent.
So Pedro, but there's a question I have back, and sorry to interrupt you in the middle, right? Because banks are so profitable out here, and they have been, year on year, the profit continues to grow. Where does the burning platform for change come from?
Right. So I was going to say, banks all over the world are investing heavily on technology and transformation, right? So a lot of this money is going into investing at the core businesses, and this is all over the world. It's not specific to the Middle Eastern banks, right? Now, what I will say is that because banks in this part of the world are more profitable, the cost to income is better, much lower than other parts of the world. There's liquidity and there's this appetite to invest and transform the businesses. And I think to a certain extent, banks over here in this region, they are in a process of leapfrog many other regions around the world. The appetite is there. The conditions and the market is there. So if you look at the demographics we have in this part of the world, internet penetration is 99%, virtually 100% over here. So all the conditions are met for banking to thrive, in this part of the world in years to come. I think there's cautious optimism around this year. I mean, interest rates might go down at some point this year or next year, but there's cautious optimism in the banking industry overall, and especially in this region.
Okay, you touched on a very interesting point, which is around technology and transformation, right? I don't know of any bank, and obviously for my sins, I'm a management consultant, so obviously I meet a number of banks. Digital transformation seems to be your theme, which has carried on for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
Although the sub themes within them have evolved because different technologies and different levels of maturity has come through, right? In your words, right, what does digital transformation mean from a bank's context?
Right. That's a really good question, because that's a buzzword that has been used for many years now, right? Look, digital transformation for us, for instance, it started maybe 10-12 years ago. I would say 2012, around that time. And the way we approached that was in various phases, right? So if you think about it, digital transformation, we started with the foundational digital banking services, establishing those services for our customers, driving adoption, testing and learning a lot of things during a period of time, which went all the way from 2012 to 2017. After that, we realized that we wanted to transform our technology stack, and we had to move the whole, architecture to the cloud, streamlining all applications. We had hundreds of applications, and at least 20-30% of that we could optimize, creating this multi-layer architecture with APIs, microservices, and all the rest. And of course, that has led into this third phase where we are now, which we call digital acceleration. I think so the way we approach digital transformation has to be well structured, has to be well thought through, and each one of these phases are important on its own right. So we could not have done one without the other, right? In other words, you can have a fantastic technology stack if you don't have a plan on how to use it, and a good plan, a robust plan on how you're going to use it. It's pointless, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, you need to invest in certain things at certain moments in time. And I think for the better part of the last 10-12 years, Emirates NBD has been investing consistently in this digital transformation.
So let me take a step back, right? And I'll try and contextualize this question in a little way, right? So customer behavior or consumer behavior is evolving, right? Yeah. Every generation which comes along has a certain level of expectation. We've gone from a world where we were in branches, and in my lifetime, right, to now where we use ENBDX, right? Or at least I use one. Yeah. And so we move completely to the mobile. And as a matter of fact, if the bank calls us to the branch, we are surprised. And even if they ask us to pick up the phone, we're shocked, right? Regulation is moving us more and more towards, digital solutions, right? Whether that is on the back of payments becoming ubiquitous and technology oriented, or, in the future CBDCs, which will come through. And there are newer technologies coming in every day, right? So we're, these days everything is about AI, digital assets, blockchain, so on and so forth. Yep. Why do we even use the word transformation anymore?
So I think it's an ongoing effort, right? You need to keep transforming. Look, this vision in our case is driven by the board, by our group CEO, Shane Nelson, by the senior executive team. We are all in it together from day one, right? So we're all committed to transform the business. And frankly, look, if we don't transform the business ourselves, somebody else will do it for us, right? So I think this idea of constant adaptation, constant transformation is very much required, Arjun. It's not something that has a beginning and an end.
So this is my question. Why use the term transformation at all? If this is business as usual, isn't it now?
Yeah, it is business as usual to a certain extent. It's a never-ending race. Every month, every quarter, every year, there are new things that you need to do, to explore, to recreate, to transform, right? So yes, I absolutely agree with that point of view.
And so that beckons the question, which is, what is the role of a CDO?
Right.
A Chief Digital Officer, sorry.
Right. So look, I think this role is evolving also over time, together with technology advancements and what customers expect. At the end of the day, the role of a CDO is to drive change, right? At its core, it's to drive change, be it cultural change, be it change in the way we work. So setting up different operating models, testing also new technologies, new ways of working, and driving that change throughout the organization. So at its core, I believe the role of a CDO is to be a change agent for the organization, to improve things and to make things better every day.
No, I like that answer, because I totally agree with you, because I think a lot of the change that you guys are driving, yes, it's technology related change, but I think it's about behaviors, it's the way you work, it's new business models. And I think a lot of people in the past have ignored those parts and thought that, we'll just put a new technology and the world changes, but it doesn't happen that often, because I think we are all implicitly, I think people find it hard to change. So,
Absolutely.
There's an enablement of change that happens. Let us switch gears a little bit, right? It's a topic that, as I said at the start of the show, we were on a common table or on a round table, and we were discussing, which is this world of banks and fintechs. Right. I think a lot of the rhetoric in the early days was the fintechs are coming and they're going to, steal the lunch and the dinner and the breakfast that the banks have.
Right.
The story is quite different, right? There are places where I think fintechs have come, impacted banks in a way I think fintechs have potentially accelerated some of that transformation that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. Your view in terms of this discussion, right? So where do you see collaboration between banks and fintechs heading in this region specifically?
Right. So, look, first of all, I think collaboration is there to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. It's only increasing over time. Now, there is these interesting dynamics in the market where somehow we see, so banks are becoming more and more technology companies. Technology companies are becoming more like fintechs. And then fintechs are becoming more like banks, right? So if you think about it, I mean, I think the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, right? And we need to work together to find that optimal, collaboration and that optimal middle ground where everybody contributes to a better outcome, right? So we work with hundreds, literally hundreds of fintechs from around the world. In the last 2 years or so, we have engaged, almost 500 fintechs. 500, almost 500
wow.
of them. 20% of them have gone through, we have a rigorous process to scout, evaluate, assess these fintechs. 20% of them have actually gone through a POC stage, and some of them are being implemented. So this is, again, a never-ending cycle that we will continue. And we are very much open for business and happy to partner with whoever brings value to the table.
So from where you sit, do you see fintechs predominantly as friends, foes, or frenemies?
I think they are mostly friends, to be honest with you. They are partners, right? They are partners. Look, one thing I will say, we have a fantastic team to engage with fintechs and these partners. We have the right talent, we have the right skills, we have the right knowledge to assess these different opportunities. So when we sit across the table with the fintech, we know what to ask. We have a very well robust process, a very strong process to evaluate if this fits within what we need or not, and then how we're going to go about it. So I think it's going really well.
What do you say to people, or say to folks who talk about the fact that, fintechs should be, even if they are carrying out quasi-regulated activities, they should be given a little bit more regulatory reprieve, right? Do you believe that philosophy, or do you believe in the view that If the activity looks and smells like it's a regulated activity, it should be fully regulated. And so therefore they should fall under the same sort of policies and procedures and jurisdictions which banks do.
So I think the latter is probably more reasonable, right? If they are indeed, conducting or performing activities which should be regulated or are borderline regulated, they probably should be regulated, right? So bear in mind that banking is a very, regulated industry, right? There are compliance, there are strict rules and regulations that we need to follow. And one of the things that we see, for instance, when we engage with fintechs, right, from around the world, is that oftentimes they are not entirely aware or ready to discuss those regulations and how they're going to go about that, right? So their level of readiness, right, to incorporate the scrutiny that the bank requires is more often than not a blocker.
So then how do we give them the chance to innovate? Because just, the cost of regulation is prohibitive, let's be honest, in any part of the world.
Right.
Most startups, have limited access to I guess cash, if I use that term. They're predicated on this context that they're innovative. Will we not stifle innovation if we actually start putting, as you said very nicely, things which are close to being regulated, if we actually come with a full regulatory angle on them? And again, this is just a question I ask. I'm not suggesting to pass an edict here. Do you think you can still be innovative to that extent and be regulated?
So I think there's a balance that can be achieved there, honestly. And I've seen it myself, right? So I think regulators are, especially in this part of the world, I think they're quite progressive. Mm-hmm. They're quite supportive of innovation. So if there's a good idea on the table, be it from a bank, a fintech, or a combination of the both parties, right? I don't see that the regulator would stop that, right? So to that extent, I think, as long as we find, a balanced, solution that protects the bank, protects our customers, then we can.
And I like that
idea.
And I like that personally. Not to pass a sweeping statement. I'm a big proponent of actually that collaboration, where I think if banks and fintechs can collaborate, I think you not only, yes, it'll take a little bit longer to get to the market, right? But then you have access to scale, you have more sustainability, and arguably a pathway to greater success. And I think at the end of the day, you want a successful business over a period of time. You just don't want to run fast at the sake of failing, right? And I do agree. Let me ask you a question, and I'm not asking you to name any fintechs, but talk to us about a couple of areas where you have collaborated with fintechs in either on the infrastructure side or on a product side.
So we have collaborations, I mean, without mentioning any names in particular over here, but we have collaborations with fintechs in the space of payments, in the space of AI. Okay. Recently, we have collaborations in cybersecurity, payments, mentioned that, and business banking or SME banking as well, right? So we have done, data and authentication or digital identity as well, right? Yeah. So these are some of them that come to mind. Like I said, this is a never-ending race.
And these are interesting areas, because I do think that these are areas where I think fintechs can bring speed, new technologies, greater ways of doing it. And I think it's essential for you guys to have it as a part of your business. So obviously these relationships are sustainable, right? And
absolutely.
I think areas like cybersecurity and AI. Let me flip the question. What have been the challenges working with these guys?
So look, we talked about regulations, right? I think the second one would be around scalability, right? So sometimes a product or a solution that is on the table by fintech A or B or C, right, do not have the ability to scale up. And when fintechs interact with banks, large banks, medium-sized banks, or large banks, right? What happens is that banks are always looking for scalability, and it's not scalability only on a vertical way, right? So in a particular product or segment. So sometimes more often than not, right, we are looking for solutions that can be scalable across businesses, across countries, across entities, right? And the solution that the fintechs offer might not be at that stage of development, right? So that's one thing, right? The other thing I will say is around data privacy and how we're going to protect, customers' data, right? It's something that, again, fintechs are not always very, very well aware of those requirements that we need to follow in terms of our processes and policies, right? So I think these three things, the regulation, right, the scalability, and the data privacy, are three things that normally we look at those very seriously, right? And if one of them is not in place, then we sometimes things get stopped or derailed.
Delayed. Yeah. Which brings me to the good question, right? You said you've been working with, or you have, I guess, experimented, if I may use that term, with something like 500 odd fintechs, or engaged with 500.
Yeah.
And you said 20% of them have actually made it to the POC level. So talk to us a little bit about, corporate experimentation, if I may use that term, right? What's the philosophy on corporate experimentation? How does ENBD run it?
Okay, that's a great question. So look, this idea of digital labs, right, has been there for a while, right?
Sure.
And we also use it very often. I mean, we have developed many first to market innovations. Emirates NBD has, I think, a legacy of innovation over the years, right? I think the bank launched the first peer-to-peer mobile payment service in the market, the first tablet sales application in the market, the first ITM, the first direct remit product in the market, right, allowing customers to transfer money cross-border in 60 seconds and so on. So all these things are part of a DNA of innovation which is in the bank, right? The way and recently we have actually during the Dubai FinTech Summit we have showcased this Apple Vision Pro, a prototype that we did specifically for that event, right? So that's a good example. There you go, of one initiative that we have done in a matter of weeks. In fact, from ideation to all the way to prototyping, I think we took three weeks or thereabout to do it, and that type of initiatives fosters creativity, right? But it allows us to test things inside the bank in a safe environment, right? Where we decouple that from the core banking activities the bank is running, right? So there's a de-risking element to that, which is a big advantage. And of course, we can prototype, we can test, we can learn, and we can co-create also with our customers and see what works and what doesn't work. So I'm a big proponent of that.
On corporate, I personally think corporate experimentation is the way forward, because especially at the speed at which banks or other entities such as yours, large entities, are having to adopt new solutions, there is no option but to. I have a question right at the front end of this journey on the scouting side. So does the bank actually have scouts? Are you guys going out and looking at new technologies and new fintechs? Or because you're so big, you have a constant supply of, I guess, fintechs, tech fins knocking on your door saying, hey, we have something interesting, let us come and showcase? I guess the answer is a bit of both, but I'm very interested to understand, how do you guys go about doing the scouting?
Yeah, so that's another good point. So we have a little bit of both, obviously, right? We have partnerships with some of the local players in the region,
So
right?
Accelerator.
We have
incubators,
plug and play in Abu Dhabi, Hub 71. We have the IFC Hive. We have you, and then FinTech Tuesdays, right?
Yeah.
I think we're very well connected in this region when it comes to FinTech. With the FinTech scene and what's happening, and that it gives us an inflow of opportunities almost organically, right? And then we all do our own scouting, right? So we have a team, a FinTech team, which is, equipped with the right, skills, tools, etc., to scout throughout the world what works and what doesn't work for us, and what might add value to Emirates NBD Group or not.
So what goes well with corporate experimentation? My humble opinion, two other things. I want to come to it very quickly. The first is corporate venture capital, right? I assume you are quite active. Obviously, not every investment is publicly known, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys believe in CVC as a way forward? Is that a way for you to de-risk some of these relationships that you build with fintechs, and especially with the ones that have to be scaled and so on and so forth, because they might not have capital? Or do you see CVC as a financial play, i.e., there's a great opportunity, this fintech might actually become a future, I don't like using the word unicorn, but successful, and so therefore, we have the opportunity to unlock greater value. What's the CVC philosophy within the bank?
So definitely the first. So we're not in this space to look for valuations on fintechs where we invest. We are rather there to explore and identify fintechs or technology partners who can bring value to the group. Be it in our domestic market, international markets, in the retail banking space, in the corporate and institutional banking space, wherever it makes sense, right? So this is the criteria that we follow. We have an investment fund that was set up, I think, early last year.
Yep.
It's about $100 million. We have investments already that some of them are public. One company in Switzerland, Comgo, which operates on trade finance. We have Ergovan in Turkey, which operates a ESG marketplace, right? There's Bridgewise, which is an AI company also in the space of equity research. So we continue to explore these opportunities as they come along, and we're also looking actively to what can add value to the group.
Okay, and just as a question, does your corporate experimentation arm, your CVC arm, work very closely with each other, or is the governance quite separated, and you guys come together when you have to?
No, I think they work quite closely together. Although I gotta say, these are two different activities, right? One activity is looking for fintechs that can add value with a product which is there already made, right? And these investment arms are more strategic in nature, right? So I would say one can be more tactical, the other one can be more strategic. But they are two sides of the same coin at the end of the day. You're right.
Come together. Yeah. Now, let me give you the third dimension. I'm very keen to hear your view. And this is an interesting conversation where I don't get a consistent answer from banks, which is venture building within banks.
Right.
Two-part question to you, right? If you're doing corporate experimentation, you're doing CVC, do banks also need to do venture building? And secondly, are banks the right institutions who should be, even through partnerships, getting into venture building?
So venture building, again, is a broad concept, right? Venture building can be setting up a new business model. It can be setting up a new entity. It can be setting up, exploring, a new business opportunity in a different market, and everything in between, right? So if you take, for instance, Liv as a digital bank, right, is a venture. It is a venture at the end of the day that was created inside Emirates NBD Group. And the idea behind it is essentially twofold, right? In one hand, Liv enables Emirates NBD Group to have an augmented market coverage. If you think about it, Emirates NBD covers pretty much all segments in the market with a conventional banking, proposition. We have Emirates Islamic, which of course covers, the market in terms of Islamic banking proposition, right? And then we have Liv, which covers the rest of the market with a digital-only banking proposition. So that way we cover the full spectrum of demand which is there in the market. The second aspect to this is we use Liv as a platform of innovation for the group. It's essentially the arm of innovation for the group. So that gives us the ability to test and run products before we scale them up to the rest of the group. So to that extent, I think this gives Emirates NBD Group a fantastic competitive advantage that others may not have or may have. But for us, we see it as a competitive advantage. And I think the benefits are clear, right? We have this two-pronged approach. And in both cases, is a win-win.
So Pedro, let me get on to what you just mentioned, right? So you've said Liv is an interesting test bed. Apologies, those are my words, right? For the wider group, right? Give us a couple of examples of product solution services that got incubated within the Liv environment and then have been scaled.
Right. So look, I think from the digital onboarding journey to digital checks that you sign on your mobile phone, to payments using your social media credentials or mobile numbers in this case. There's a number of things that were tested on Liv that have been replicated into the larger group. And we continue on that journey, right? Now, you may have seen certain products and services being announced and released on Liv, and we will do more of those. And as they get tested and we learn from those experiences, we are, of course, going to, consider scaling them up to the larger group.
Am I in a position to ask you how big Liv is today in terms of scale and size?
So absolutely. So look, Liv acquired close to 500,000 customers in the UAE alone. Okay. You think about it, it's like close to 10% of the bankable population in the country. So that's a significant number.
I said, wow, that's a significant percentage.
So over the years, this is the number of customers that we have acquired, and that goes to show that there's demand, because it's not just Liv. Other banks in the market, including neobanks, are also growing in that particular segment, which goes to show there's demand in the market for these.
There is tremendous demand for I guess, these digital. Let me talk about, cognizant of time, but I think there are 2 or 3 interesting trends, and I'm sure the audience is very keen to hear your views. So in no particular order, right? Yeah. What do you see the potential of banking as a service? Is it the game changer that some people believe it is, right? Obviously, we are now having open banking, open finance coming in, which in my humble opinion is got a symbiotic relationship with banking as a service.
I agree.
How big a game changer is it? Where do you think the changes will happen?
Okay, that is a fantastic question. And look, there is not an easy answer to that, but I will give it a shot. In my view, so banking as a service and open banking and embedded finance, right? They go almost hand in hand.
They go exactly
right, and I think this will open new business models, which we already started seeing in other parts of the world, by the way. And I think banks will have to adapt to that new reality sooner than later, right? This idea that banks operate within their own single domains is long gone. I think the idea of exploring partnerships for banking as a service, opportunities, embedded finance, and of course, open finance is an underlying regulatory framework that will probably serve as a catalyst to many of these things. Now, these regulations are coming into place over here in the EU. They were announced. In countries like KSA or Bahrain, they are already there. So this is happening, Arjun. And I think we all need to be cognizant that this is happening, and we need to prepare ourselves for that future.
No, we do. And I think let's talk about embedded finance for a second, because, ENBD has a long history of, being a leading player in the payment space.
Yeah.
People who are not aware, Network International, as we know it, was actually incubated. It was one of the incubated business which came out of the NBD. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you might not know, that was the reason why I actually arrived in the Middle East, was to actually work with Network International. They were clients of mine. I was in consulting even then. So I guess there's a long-standing association with the NBD from my personal perspective. Beyond payments, right? And we've been embedding payments incredibly well, and Apple Pay is the best example of embedded payments that everyone understands, right? BNPL has played a role in terms of embedding lending, while some people think it sort of traverses payments and lending, right? How easy do you see will products like saving products, wealth management products get embedded, right? Do you really see an opportunity for non-financial services players, right, whether retailers, telcos, so on and so forth, to make a go in these other categories? I can see all of them offering money remittances and easy payments and possibly lending products for their core. But do you see them getting into more core banking products where people's association is more with the financial services entity? What's your view on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I would say there will be attempts to do that. In fact, some countries far to the in the Far East or east of the world are probably more advanced in that journey rather than the West or the Middle East. And I think wealth management products, definitely savings products, I don't see why not. Wealth management products, probably customers would tend to be a bit more conservative with that. But having said that, there's a new generation of customers out there, Gen Z, and they come with a different mindset, right? They don't feel threatened by the fact that their savings or their wealth needs to be with a bank. If there's a FinTech that offers a good proposition, good products, good services, good solutions for them, they will go for it, right? In fact, many of us will go for it with a percentage or a portion of our portfolios, right? So future generations will be probably even more comfortable of going the extra mile on that, right? So I think this is inevitable. This will open up, like I said, new business models, new partnership models, and banks will have to look into that very seriously in the coming years, for sure.
Let me flip the thing on it, and let me talk a little bit about beyond banking, right? So what's very interesting is JP Morgan has a huge travel business, right? Revolut and some of the other players have all introduced eSIMs and offering cards. Others are offering other forms of beyond banking services. Some companies offering mortgage services have gone and said, we'll offer you even home brokerage services or home find services. In this region, right? And you guys have been fantastic. Your dining program has been around for ages, and which sits well with the payments side.
That's right.
Right? Do you see banks embrace beyond banking in this region and go really, really beyond banking?
So, look, I think customers will dictate that to a great extent, right? So we have done some of that experimentation ourselves as well, right? So you mentioned, the dining program. We have association with payments. So our products team, I think they are second to none, and they did a really good job pairing up those experiences. We have tried, booking flights through Liv and booking events and things like that, which are definitely going beyond banking. Do we see an extensive customer uptake on that? I think it's relative.
Yep.
It's relative, right? There's this customer behavior that will dictate if customers are going to look for that in a bank or in a banking environment, rather than going into a e-commerce, a retailer, to do such things, and then banking is already there. I would tend to think that the latter would be probably more plausible and more feasible in the near term. But let's see how things will evolve over time.
No, I think you're right. We did a survey actually a couple of years out. I'd be more than happy to share with you, where we actually surveyed, and this is the firm I work with, where we actually, I think, surveyed over 3,000 individuals in the UAE across the top 10 banks, customers of the top banks. And we were surprised, actually. There was a fair amount of appetite, but as you said, it's all relative, fair amount of appetite to consume non-banking services, which were closely interlinked with a substantial financial services outgoing, right? So purchase of cars, for example, some level of, value-added services on house hunting, because largely, I guess, most people don't trust their real estate advisor and so on and so forth. I do think it is interesting. I think the jury is out. I think on this, I think jury is out. I think there are clear ecosystems which can be built. I think JP Morgan, with what they've done on their travel, is quite interesting, because they've built a whole ecosystem around payments. I think insurance services and so on and so forth, because they believe that the credit card gets used so often for travel. Well, why don't we actually own that customer journey? And you don't have to build it yourself these days, because there are third-party providers, technology platforms, which will come and give you the platform. And you can sort of white label it. No, that's great. I'm cognizant of time. This is my last question to you. Might be the hardest question that I'm asking you. How does the role of the CDO, I know you gave me what the role means today. Over the next 5 years, with all this new technology coming on board, right? How does the role of the CDO evolve? Is it still remain pretty much the same, which is about driving change, which I believe there will be an element, or is there something else that's out there which I think the CDOs of the world need to be cognizant of?
Look, I think the role will definitely continue to evolve, like all other roles, right? With technology, technology mandates that CDOs and all executive teams, business teams, product teams, segment teams, data teams, etc., we evolve together, right, in that journey. If you think about it, in the next, foreseeable future, we will see significant advancements in AI for sure. So CDOs would have to be, equipped to deal with that, right? Blockchain is bringing and the whole space of digital assets, right? And that's not just cryptocurrencies, right? It's CBDCs, stable coins, and digitalization of real world assets. So there's lots of things happening in that space. We mentioned open banking or open finance, embedded finance, and all the rest. There's cybersecurity,
data security,
right?
Yes.
There's data privacy, right? There's digital identity. There's cloud computing. There's so many things that we need to be aware, and we need to navigate that complexity, right? Now, the good thing is that when you look at the landscape, and despite the fact that many of these things are going through a curve and an evolution, right? You need to keep them on your radar. So I think the ability, in this case for CDOs to keep all these things in their radar and know when to activate some of them is going to be really important, right? Because you cannot possibly work on all of them at the same time. So you need to prioritize, right? We need to be able to distinguish, between the noise on what's going to create value or not. And that's going to be really important in the future as it is now.
So I've got a second part to that question, which is, do you think that there is ample representation of understanding of technology in the senior management teams across the banks?
So, I can speak for Emirates NBD Group at our level. Definitely, that representation and that awareness, more importantly, is there, right? Like I said, all the way from the board, our executive team, our group CEO, everyone is involved on technology discussions. We have frequent committees where the majority of our ExCo members join for an open discussion on ideas and on things that we need to unblock or discuss frequently. Every 2 weeks, more or less, we do that. We have, of course, IT steering committees and all the rest where we're all there. So it's very frequent and it's very. It's refreshing to see a company like Emirates NBD doing that. Now, I cannot speak for many other banks, but I would think many of them are
definitely there or moving in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Pedro, I'd like to thank you. Thanks for coming in this evening. I'm going to let you now go back to some family time. I guess that's important. But I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much, Arjun. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Pedro Sousa Cardoso, who is the Chief Digital Officer with Emirates NBD. I hope you found this conversation interesting. I did not go as deep in technology as I tend to go on other episodes because I really wanted to home in on the width of everything that ENBD is doing and in the sector. So with that, I'll say goodbye and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.